Well, hello and welcome to the Alumni House podcast. My name is Matt.
I'm the Quacker.
Quacker, how you doing tonight?
Doing good. It's
We are,
almost. We're getting close to the weekend. I have one more day left in my work week this week, so I'm stoked.
yeah, me as well. And we are edging ever closer to um, football season, which is just so exciting. I can't even bear it. And in the spirit of that, this is episode 3 of The Vault. And this is one I've been really, really excited about. Because not only was this incredibly special because, there were 2 spectacular once-in-a-lifetime events that happened to the same team in consecutive games over a 3-week period. But I specifically remember where I was and what I was doing for both of those moments. And I have some family. Of course, we're talking about the 2013 football season, the end of that season for the Auburn Tigers. And it is known as the Miracle on the Plains, or Miracles on the Plains, for the 2 games that we're going to cover tonight. But I have some family who are a mixture of fans and alumni of Auburn, and I'm not an Auburn fan, but I kind of got to share in that those moments with them. Because I have no love for the teams that Auburn was playing in Georgia and Alabama, so it was kind of a win-win for me personally. Quacker, before we get into it, I mean, what do you remember just kind of about the surrounding atmosphere, your bubble, and how you experienced these moments?
Yeah. The Georgia game I don't remember as well, but I will remember the Alabama game for forever. I mean, because was it the day after Thanksgiving, or I don't remember if it was that Friday or Saturday after Thanksgiving, but there were still several of us, around, and watching that game. Most of us aren't Alabama fans. If you're an Alabama fan out there, sorry, it's not who we
I mean,
pull
if you're
for.
not an Alabama fan, you're not an Alabama fan,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's kind of
I mean,
like
I've
Ohio
always,
State.
yeah, I've always been a huge Nick Saban fan. I ever since he kind of came on the scene at Michigan State, I've always been a fan of his, and
Don't forget his
I
time
love
in
the way.
Cleveland.
Well,
I'm just joking.
yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
joking.
yeah, but
I think he was
I mean,
Cleveland, but
he's always been one of those coaches that's you know he's kind of easy to pull for, and you kind of say that you're like, well, he's kind of got a gruff attitude. He does, but it's because he expects so much out of himself and his team and his players. And I've always been a big fan of that, and I've always been a big fan of his coaching style. So just not being a fan of the team that he was coaching made it kind of hard to pull for him while also despising his team. But
yeah. Well,
yeah, that kick 6 game was one of those where like you said, you remember that forever. Just you
yeah.
remember everything around that moment.
Well, and Nick Saban, early on in his career, particularly early at Alabama, so the ending of his tenure at Miami and the first few years at Alabama, I felt like the way he handled the media, was inappropriate because he was making millions of dollars and getting frustrated at the media doing their job. It's not dissimilar to the way Dion handles the media right now. It's like if he doesn't like it, they're not going to be a part of it. Well, part of your job and part of the deal for making all that money you make is to deal with the media. But as Nick Saban got older, he got a lot better. In fact, his last season, he was almost like jovial with the media. It was weird. But throughout his career, you very rarely saw players get in trouble. And what's really special is, with a few exceptions, and you're going to have these when you have as many players as he did, but almost all of his players didn't get in trouble in the NFL or post Alabama. You do have a handful that certainly did, and that's not I'm not trying to gloss over that at all, but he created young men who had robust character. I remember one time, I don't even remember who they were playing, and this is the last thing I'll say on that before we jump in. It was probably 2013 or 14, something like that, and one of the young players on special teams got his wires crossed and ran into the punt returner and caused a kick catch interference. And Hightower ran up to him and was like, "Dude, what are you doing?" Because that's such an uncharacteristic thing for an Alabama player. But you had people on the field who weren't like, you could tell Hightower was like, he was disappointed and annoyed at the moment, but he's like, "Man, you got to do better." And he was like coaching him on the field. And I feel like that's emblematic of what you saw with Nick Saban guys. And we'll talk about this later, but one thing I didn't like about the Auburn fans in the Kick Six was, they were all making fun of him and saying, "Oh, you got what you deserved for fighting for that extra second and everything." But the thing is, though, he was trying to give his team a chance to win. It just so happened that one of the most improbable plays in football happened, So, but all right. So, are you ready to jump in?
Let's jump in with both feet.
All right, let's do it. All right, so in 2013, the Auburn Tigers had the wildest ending to 2 consecutive games that is, I don't even know if it's probably, but that has probably ever happened in college football, or for that matter, sports. I mean, I would argue that this is as monumental an achievement as the Red Sox beating the Yankees after being down 0-3. It's right up there in terms of improbability and the significance and everything else. They had not one but 2 games in a row end up with a name. And, that's either really good or really bad if you play in a game that
right.
winds up with a name. And it's a rare feat for a school to have one game named. Auburn reached rarefied air by having 2 consecutive games end up with a name. Auburn was in their first season under Gus Malzahn. I did not realize that was his first season. I thought it was his second, but it's been a long time. And who was returning to the Tigers after being the offensive coordinator in 2010 when they won the national championship with Cam Newton. Trivia question: do you remember who they played in that game?
Oregon.
Yep. I figured you'd know that, but
yeah.
All right, so then 2013 was also the year that the 130-year-old landmark oak trees at Toomer Corner, wow, words are hard, had been cut down after being poisoned by a delusional Alabama fan in 2010. It's hard to believe that's been 15 years ago, but if you're a college football fan or a sports fan, you've probably heard the clip where the guy called into Paul Feinbaum, admitted what he did, and Paul Feinbaum, I mean, was kind of like shocked, like didn't know whether to take it seriously or not, or what it was going to do. But one of the coolest things I saw was McElroy, which I can't remember if he was already gone or if it was his last year, but McElroy, who was of course at one time the quarterback of Alabama, Auburn's arch rival, helped lead a social media charge to save those trees. And of course they weren't able to save them, But that act of incredible stupidity led to a really cool moment of unity in sports that's also pretty rare. You know, because
Yeah.
I don't think I remember talking to any sports fan who was like, "Oh yeah, I'm glad those trees are dead." I think everybody was like, "Man, that sucks," you know. Um,
Yeah.
but of course, they've got a new a new little area set up to where they can still roll Tumor's Corner, and that's really cool. And if you have not been there, you need to go to Auburn and check out Tumor's Corner because it's awesome.
Yeah, it is. Really good lemonade there too. Yeah, it's a side note. At that pharmacy there. Um, all right. So the first name game was the prayer Jordan Hare, and of course the very next game was the infamous Kick Six. This game was so famous it became infamous. To steal a line from the Three Amigos there. Um, both of these games were against rivals in already named rivalry games. The prayer Jordan Hare was against the Georgia Bulldogs in the 117th installment of the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Yes, for those who don't know, Auburn has played Georgia way more and way longer than they played Alabama. And then 2 weeks later, the Kick Six took place against Auburn's most hated rival, the Alabama Crimson Tide, in the Iron Bowl. So the first game we're going to talk about is the prayer at Jordan Hare. Going into the game, Auburn and Georgia's rivalry stood at 54, 54, and 8, with Georgia coming in having won the previous season in a hard fought, down to the wire, 38-0 win over Auburn.
Yeah, 54-54-8. That's pretty even, wouldn't you say? Um,
Yeah.
so all right. So and another cool thing about this is both of these games took place at Jordan Hare, which you know, as you know, like it's cool to have a special ending or moment in a game in any stadium, but it's extra special when it happens in your home stadium and you can hear the pop of the crowd and everything like that. Um,
Yeah.
so so yeah, that's really cool. So Auburn was having a much better season in 2013, coming in with a record of 9-1, and their only loss being to LSU in an absolute monsoon. Um, and it's interesting, just as a side note, I remember listening to the radio on my way to work prior to the season. It was a couple of weeks before the season, and they were the show I was listening to. They were interviewing Malzahn, and he was talking about this kid who was a transfer from Georgia and was a defensive back who's going to play quarterback for him. And I was like, that is
Mm-hmm.
not going to work. And of course, I'm talking about Nick Marshall. I was wrong. It worked, and Nick Marshall led them all the way to the national championship and played a part in this first game. So Auburn was ranked number 7 in the AP poll and the BCS poll, while Georgia was ranked at 25. This was also the last year of the BCS.
Yep. Sure
And
was.
Georgia was ranked 25th in both polls. Auburn came in as a 3-point favorite. They would end up winning by 6. The game was televised by CBS with Vern Lundquist and Gary Danielson calling the game. It was, of course, a sellout crowd with 87,451 in attendance, and the atmosphere in the stadium was electric. In a game where Auburn jumped out to a 17-point halftime lead and after 3 quarters still held the 17-point lead, Georgia came roaring back in the fourth quarter by scoring 21 points and holding Auburn to only 3. All right. So, with 36 seconds left in the game, Auburn was down to their last chance on a 4th and 18 from their own 26.5-yard line. Georgia lined up in a prevent defense, rushing only 3 defenders and dropping the other 8 defenders into coverage. Their goal to stop any Auburn receivers from getting behind them, of course, which is typical of the prevent defense, unless you're the Saints and you screw it up in a playoff game in Minnesota. But I'm not bitter about that. It's fine. Sorry. Auburn QB Nick Marshall would take the snap out of shotgun and take a deep drop back before stepping up to his own 20 to heave the ball as far as he could downfield. Auburn's Ricardo Lewis, a name that otherwise would be completely lost in the shuffle, but instead is going to be remembered forever. He was able to get behind the Georgia defense, but Marshall's pass was short of Lewis. So Georgia safeties Josh Harvey Clemens and Trey Matthews came together trying to catch the ball and ended up tipping the ball into the air, where Lewis would reach back and tip the ball to himself. He actually looked over his head. It was just one of those moments where everything lined up perfect, because he was running, just happened to look up and kind of back, and then it just fell into his arms. In fact, before I read the rest of this, I was so sure that game was over. I was on the phone with my friend, and I had the game muted. I had it on, but it was muted. And he wasn't watching it either. He had given up on the game. And I was like, dude, holy crap. And, of course, this is what happened. So he tipped the ball to himself, and without ever breaking stride, caught the ball and sprinted into the end zone for a 73-yard Hail Mary touchdown. Auburn would be flagged for unsportsmanlike conduct. Who cares? Following the touchdown because of their players coming into the field to celebrate. This penalty pushed them back as they were attempting a 2-point conversion to push their lead to 8 with only 25 seconds left on the clock. Auburn would miss their conversion attempt, but their defense would hold on for the final 25 seconds.
Yeah, and so we're fixing to play Auburn's radio broadcast call from Rod Bramblett, and we're also going to play the TV call. And the TV call is one I remember because I was watching it on CBS. And I mean, you have kind of gone back and forth on Vern Lundquist. I've always said I liked Vern. I didn't like Gary. But Vern was always good in the big moments, whether you liked him or not for the most part. He was always good in the big moments. And he had a really good call here on this one. And Bramblett, for his case, this would have been the call of his career if not for the following game. How often do you have two career-defining calls in a two-game span here? So, Matt, if you want to go ahead and tee up.
That's just before I play. That's obviously made special, even more special, by the fact that he's no longer with us. A few years later. But so it's not that I didn't like Vern. Vern was inarguably part of my formative years. I've shared this before. There's nothing like coming home on a Saturday when your team is not playing in the CBS game, and you open the door to your house and you hear Vern and Gary talking in late November, and the air is cool. I mean, that is part of my fall experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I will forever be grateful for Vern for that, and for Happy Gilmore, both of them. And yes, he is in the new one, in case you were wondering. But I just felt like he also did some really cool things. I mean, he was the only broadcaster that I'm aware of that read Tim Tebow's scripture reference on national television, which I will always be, I will always have a lot of respect for. I just felt like he was a little bit of a goofball sometimes, would say he didn't rise to the level of what happened to Brent Musburger. So if Brent Musburger was a 12, Vern's moments were a 7. The difference was Brent Musburger had one that was bad enough that people will always talk about.
Yeah.
It relegated him out of the limelight, and Vern had a squillion, but they were just not as bad. But I do agree in the big moment. And to be honest, as someone who's not an Auburn fan, I prefer watching the television broadcast when I replay these, and I've replayed both of them a bunch of times. All right, so let's listen to first the radio call from the Auburn Sports Network.
All right, here we go. 4th and 18 for the Tigers. Here's your ball game. Nick Marshall Stands in, steps up, going to throw downfield, just a home run ball, and it is tipped off. And Lewis caught it on the deflection. Lewis is going to score. Lewis is going to score. Lewis is going to score. Touchdown Auburn. Touchdown Auburn. A miracle at Jordan-Hare. A miracle at Jordan-Hare. 73 yards, and the Tigers, with 25 seconds to go, lead 43-38.
I mean, how can you not just love that call?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not an Auburn fan. I'm sitting here smiling about it. I mean, that was just awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool. So, all right. So now we're going to listen to the TV broadcast. This is a little bit longer. It's about a minute and a half, but it kind of sets it up. So let's check that out.
To that LSU Georgia game when they beat Zach Mettenberger, their other transfer quarterback, and Mettenberger hit that 3rd and 23. I don't know if Nick Marshall's got that in him like Mettenberger did.
4th and 18.
Same defense, though. 3-man rush.
Lets it go.
You gotta love those moments in games where the announcers just stop. And
Yeah.
Just let the crowd. That reminds me of a moment I've talked about on here before. Right after COVID, when the first like big ESPN game with people in the stands again for 2021 was Virginia Tech and North Carolina, and the guy said something like, "College football, college football is really back when you hear a packed Lane Stadium singing Enter Sandman," and he just stopped for about 3 minutes, and they just panned and the cameras did their thing, and those type of moments are just incredible. Now, of course, we are going to get a few more of those in a second. But so for the first few days after the game, Bramlett's "A Miracle at Jordan-Hare" was the going phrase as it was being printed on shirts and repeated by some publications in the state of Alabama. The Huntsville NBC affiliate WAFF was the media outlet that came up with the phrasing "the prayer at Jordan-Hare," and it quickly began to take off amongst the Auburn fans. Had it not been for the following game against Alabama, this might have been the most famous call of Bramlett's career.
And this is a guy who's called a national championship that Auburn won. He's called a championship game where Auburn has, for the first time in like 60 years, they'd won a championship, and this surpassed anything he called in that game.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, so let's move on to the Iron Bowl, which would come to be known as the Kick Six.
So after an off week, Thanksgiving week rolled around. Fans in the SEC know what Thanksgiving week means. You have the Egg Bowl, the rivalry game between Mississippi State and Ole Miss. You used to have the battle for the Golden Boot, the rivalry between Arkansas and LSU. Now you have the Battle Line rivalry, which is the rivalry game between Arkansas and Missouri. Consequently, Arkansas has two border rivalry trophy games where the trophies are shaped like the states that they're in. And of course you have the Iron Bowl, the Alabama-Auburn rivalry game, a game that wasn't played for 41 years, from 1907 to 1948. It literally took the Alabama legislature to get involved to get the schools to resume play in the game. You think about that, Matt. That's an intense rivalry when you have to get the state legislature involved.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I only in Alabama, you know what I mean? Because Alabama is the state where a former Auburn coach is, a member of the House of Representatives now.
Right.
And people are talking about Nick Saban doing it. I doubt that he will, but it is that's their thing, man. College football is life there. Really all through the Southeast, but it's a little different in Alabama. But when I say different, I don't mean different like Texas high school football, like better or elevated. It's just a little crazier.
Yeah.
I spent a little time living in Alabama, and it's not. I would not classify it as better or more special than any other place in the Southeast, but it is, however, just a little. You question priorities a little more when you're an outsider.
Right. Right.
All right. So coming into the game, Alabama was 11-0, ranked number 1 in every poll, and they were looking for their third consecutive national championship. Alabama was the betting favorite in the game with a 10-point spread. Auburn was 10-1, ranked number 4 in the AP and BCS polls, and 5 in the coaches. And they were looking to spoil Alabama's fun and maybe play for a national championship themselves. I was about to say, I got my wires crossed. I was about to say it's curious that they were 4 and then 7 the following game, but I didn't think about the fact that we're reading these in chronological order, so forgive me.
Yeah. All right, so the game was again being televised on CBS. So lucky fans, right? Of course, for those who didn't realize, CBS for what was it, Matt? Almost 30 years, they had the SEC like big game of the week contract, so they had that prime spot.
Yeah, I think it was
that somehow most
90s.
fans.
Yeah, sometime in the late 90s they took it.
Yeah, most fans when they found out their team was playing at the 2:30 game was like, oh man, it wasn't so much that it's on CBS. It's just because in the South it's hot at 2:00. It's still hot. So we like those night games down here, but so you still had good old.
Better than the morning game.
Yeah. You had good old Vern Lundquist and Gary Danielson on the call. Again, the game was sold out with 87,451 of your closest friends. And with so much on the line, the atmosphere in the stadium was at a different level. We talked about the Georgia game being their oldest rival, but it's not their most hated. Alabama's their most hated rival. So when you have your most hated rival in the stadium, you just take whatever atmosphere you've been to and pump it up by 10. Mm-hmm. And of course, this ended up being the most watched regular season game of the season, but there were 13 million people watching it from home. Now, onto the game itself. The game was very back and forth affair. Auburn scored a touchdown in the first quarter to take a 7-0 lead. And after the first quarter, and it was their first touchdown offensively against Alabama since 2010, when Cam Newton was playing quarterback for them. So they'd had a little bit of drought since he had left. So in the second quarter, Alabama's offense would explode for 3 touchdowns while holding Auburn's offense to a single touchdown. At the half, it was 21-14. At this point in his career at Alabama, Nick Saban's teams were 73-3, holding a halftime lead.
Will you read that stat again, just so it can sink in for everybody?
Nick Saban's teams were 73-3 when holding a halftime lead. In other words, they don't lose.
That's like video game. That's not real life. Like,
Right.
you see these
Yeah.
stats all the time where it's like, oh, they're 10-1 when leading at halftime or they're 20-4 or whatever. 73-3 is bananas. All right, so on to the third quarter. Auburn scored a touchdown to tie the game at 21, and Auburn's defense would turn into the Iron Curtain, not allowing Alabama to move the ball. Moving on to the fourth quarter, Alabama scored on a 99-yard touchdown pass from A.J. McCarron to Amari Cooper, the longest play in Alabama history. Isn't that funny? I feel like every year you see a kickoff return or an interception return or like a touchdown pass from all of these big schools like Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Florida, Ole Miss. And you're like, oh, this is the longest so-and-so in school history. And you're like, what? How?
Yeah.
But I feel like
at this point, how? Yeah.
Yeah. Every year I feel like that happens. So Alabama held the lead the rest of the quarter until the final 32 seconds of the game. With 32 seconds left, Nick Marshall would throw the game-tying touchdown pass to an uncovered Sammy Coates. When Alabama got the ball back, T.J. Yeldon got loose and ran the ball down to the Auburn 38-yard line, being knocked out of bounds by Chris Davis. Sorry. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a big soccer fan, and there's a guy who used to play for the U.S. national team named DeAndre Yedlin. And so I had to slow down to make sure I was saying Yeldon instead of Yedlin. And then it just messed up the rest of the sentence for me. So Davis's tackle led to the game clock expiring, but Nick Saban challenged that Yeldon had stepped out with 1 second left on the clock. Saban and the Tide won the challenge, and 1 second was put back on the clock. And Saban sent out freshman kicker Adam Griffith to attempt a game-winning 57-yard field goal. So before we move on, I forgot about this. This was right in the middle. I think he got better at this towards the end of his career, maybe because of this game. But this was right in the middle of Saban kind of like pretty publicly like not recruiting kickers and not really having a lot of patience for them. And I remember thinking, well, this is what you get, like not in like a mean way, but it's like, well, I mean, it's part of football, and I felt the same way whenever David Pollock would talk about how, kickers aren't football players and this and that. I'm like, okay, well, but without them, games would be lost, unless you fundamentally change the rules of the game.
Oh, and I did the math on that 73-3 record. That's a 96% chance that they're going to win the game.
That is insane. All right. So, instead of us explaining to you what happened, if you are, we're living on Mars and don't already know, we will once again play the broadcast. So we're going to start with the radio call and then move to the CBS call. And in my opinion, both of these calls are respectively just absolutely they're going to live on forever. And they're both phenomenal calls. So we'll start with the Auburn radio broadcast. Here we go.
So I guess if this thing comes up short, he can field it and run it out. All right, here we go. 56-yarder. Does not have the leg. And Chris Davis takes it in the back of the end zone. He'll run it out to the 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game. Auburn's going to win the football game. He ran the missed field goal back. He ran it back 109 yards. They're not going to keep him off the field tonight. Holy cow. Oh, my God. Auburn wins. Auburn has won the Iron Bowl. Auburn has won the Iron Bowl in the most unbelievable fashion you will ever see. I cannot believe it. 34-28. And we thought a miracle in Jordan Hare was amazing. Oh, my Lord in heaven. Chris Davis Davis just read it. 109 yards, and Auburn is going to the championship game.
So one of the coolest things about that, obviously, Bramlett's call is iconic. But one of my favorite things about that is at about the point where he says they're not going to keep him off the field tonight, the color guy just starts laughing out of like euphoria, and he would just occasionally like, "Oh my god!" And he reminds me, if you're a wrestling fan, of I've forgotten his name, Lawler or something.
Jerry Lawler,
the King. That's what it sounds like to me. And so that is just, I encourage you, if you haven't watched this, go watch the video clip, because you can see the camera physically shaking as the crowd realizes what's happening. So hard to top that, but we're gonna try with the CBS call, which I think, Quacker, you and I probably agree we've both heard a few more times, and is also iconic in its own way. So here we go.
Mandel will hold it. Now they've officially made it 57 yards.
Remember, a block kick can go the other way, too. He's got to be careful and get it up.
On the way. No, return by Chris Davis. Davis goes left. Davis gets a block. Davis has another block. Chris Davis. No flags. Touchdown, Auburn. An answered prayer.
I realize as we're listening to that, I have listened to that call so many times that I could see it happening in my head as I'm watching it and hearing the cues from the crowd noise. Just as an aside, this clip is a good example of one of the reasons why I like Gary Danielson. He said he noticed, as the color analyst, he noticed that Chris Davis was back there, and so he just said this little statement. He said, "Remember, if it's short, it could go the other way." And he, in my opinion, has always done a really great job of explaining things as someone with a wealth of knowledge of football and being in the stadium in a way that is extremely helpful to the fan watching at home. Because depending on the camera angle or what they're showing, you're not going to know that there's a returner back there. And just for clarification, for those of you who don't know, typically there is not a returner back for a field goal, only in long field goal situations, or maybe like extreme weather. So if there's a terrible wind and they've got to kick against the wind and it's like a 30-yarder, maybe they'll put a returner back. But it's not an everyday occurrence, and it's certainly not an everyday occurrence for it to turn into a touchdown.
It was around the same time when Odell Beckham was still at LSU. They had a similar. Of course, it was against like La Tech or Southeast or something. One of these smaller non-Power 5 schools. But they had a situation where it was a long field goal attempt, and they had a man back, and he returned it for a touchdown as well. Nowhere near the stakes of this, but. Like you say, it's not something.
The SEC championship.
Yeah,
kept them alive for the national championship.
Yeah. So Gary Danielson would later compare the game to the Miracle on Ice, equating Auburn's upset of Alabama to the amateur USA Olympic hockey team defeating the powerhouse Soviet Union hockey team during the 1980 Winter Olympics, which was not the gold medal game, by the way. That was the semifinal. Auburn would go on to beat Missouri in the SEC championship game and earn a berth into the final BCS national championship game, where they would lose a nail-biter to Florida State, 34-31. It's crazy that 3 of their last 4 games all came down to pretty much the final play of the game. Like, the only one that they had that wasn't close was that SEC championship game. All the rest of those came down to pretty much like the final play.
Yeah, against Missouri in the SEC championship. I will always be a little annoyed at the way the national championship played out, because you really almost had a third miracle when, I've forgotten his name, but the running back broke that long run to score the go-ahead touchdown. But they scored too fast. They got the ball with like 2 or 3 minutes left and left Florida State with like a minute and a half in the game. And then Mr. Offensive Pass Interference himself, Kelvin Benjamin, did what he does and didn't get called for anything. And that's that. So, again,
right.
I'm not bitter, but.
All right. So the aftermath of the kick six call and play itself, Bramlett's call, of course, this, we hear the term now and you're like, oh, of course. It went viral. And this is before things really went viral. But it went viral, garnering him national media attention and resulted in Bramlett being named Sports Broadcaster of the Year by Sports Illustrated, which doesn't exist anymore, except for like online. The call also has been named as one of the greatest announcer calls in recent sports history, with New York Times calling it the call of a lifetime. I'd have to agree with that. In a 2020 interview, Vern Lindquist called it the greatest sporting moment he had ever witnessed. High praise for a man who has been at the mic for some of the best moments in sports.
And saw the rise of Happy Gilmore.
Yeah.
So, does Sports Illustrated, is it not in print anymore?
It's just strictly digital, and I don't even know that they're all
sad.
that heavy. Yeah.
That's sad. I used to collect those. At one time, I had about 8 or 10 years worth of Sports Illustrateds. Man, that's unfortunate. But such is the world. So, quick trivia question before we move on to close out the episode. Do you know who the U.S. played in the gold medal game?
I want to say it was Finland.
Well, you would be correct. It is Finland.
All right.
Yep, there you go. Congratulations. I really, that was a deep cut. I didn't think you'd get that.
That was before either one of us even thought of being born there.
Yep,
So that was.
That's true. All right. So Pat Forty, who's long been one of my favorites, who was at the time a columnist for Yahoo, stated it was quite simply the most astounding ending ever to a college football game. I was at the Boise State, Oklahoma Fiesta Bowl in 2007. This tops it. More at stake and even more shock value on the final play, minus the player proposing to his girlfriend on the field and the field reporter ruining it because he's an idiot. But that aside, I don't know if you remember that, but he thought it was a joke, and he said, he was interviewing the guy, and he goes, I understand you want to propose to your girlfriend, right? And the girl just starts freaking out, and then the dude just like class act just kneels down and like actually proposes, and I was like, man, what a jerk, dude! Like totally took the wind out of his sails. All right, an article in USA Today described the back-to-back victories with the analogy that lightning struck twice, with the Georgia game being one of the greatest finishes to a college football game, and the Alabama upset perhaps the greatest play in college football history. I would agree with that. The Birmingham News called the Auburn victory their latest miracle finish, even more stunning than the first. And then at the 2014 ESPY Awards, the game won Best Game for 2013, and the game-winning touchdown was named Best Play, beating out 3 other nominees, including the prayer at Jordan Hare. That's pretty.
Can you? They had 2 of the 4, and
Yeah, we were thinking the same thing. That's pretty crazy. That like you said in the open, it's pretty crazy to have 2 of those happen. Period. But to have 2 of them happen in the same season and both be nominated for ESPYs is pretty wild. So the crowd reaction from the final play registered on seismographs across the state of Alabama, similar to what happened on the final play of the 1988 Auburn LSU game, which has been named the Earthquake game. Quite a famous game in and of itself. Much like the prayer Jordan Hare, there were multiple names that popped up around the kick six with Kick Bama Kick winning an online poll. That's weird. I think that one's kind of stupid. The Kick Bama Kick was a play off of the 1972 Iron Bowl game named Punt Bama Punt. Okay, that's a little less stupid. Kick Six quickly emerged as the most common moniker for the game. And, just thinking about it, it's been really cool talking about this because this obviously, you and I both have vivid memories of this sequence of events, but just such a cool moment to experience. And another piece of media you should all check out. I don't know if it's a 30 for 30 or an SEC story, but they're basically the same thing. But there's, I think it's called Miracle on the Plains, where they kind of go through and set up the context around these games and what happens. And it really is crazy. So my brother-in-law, who is about 12 years older than me, has been a lifelong Auburn fan. And I remember jumping on Facebook to check out my friends' reactions after this happened, and I will never, ever forget this. This is 5 minutes after the Kick Six. My brother-in-law, who never posts on Facebook, put a post with no pictures that simply said this: "I love Auburn," with about 15 exclamation marks, all caps. And I was just like, yep, that just about sums it up. I mean, everybody was excited. I was excited, and I didn't care less about Auburn,
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of those, like, that's that moment that's just, even if it's not your team, it just sticks with you forever. Like, you'll remember where you were, 40 years from now. And in the moment, like, knew what had happened the previous game with the last second win, but you don't think about it till you look back years later, and you're like, holy smokes, we just saw two miracle finishes, like, back to back by the same team in the same stadium. It's just it's one of those things in the moment. It's almost hard to appreciate. It's one of those things with hindsight. You're like, we got to witness something really special.
Yeah. Now, I will say this. I think that most people like you and I who pay pretty close attention to sports pretty immediately knew that this was going to be, like, historical. Because this was like a watershed moment. I would equate it to like Nixon being impeached, for those who were around for that. For sports. I don't mean like the same levity or weight, but what I mean is that I remember thinking after the prayer of Jordan Hare, I was like, that is going to be one of the greatest plays in college football. And then 2 weeks later to see the Kick Six, I was thinking to myself, I was like, nobody's ever going to top that. And I think the only thing that kind of sours it a little bit, and I think any Auburn fan would tell you this, the only thing that really sours it is they weren't able to cap it off with a national championship. But they put up a really good fight against a really good team and the Heisman Trophy winner. So, they can hold their heads high from that. So, any final thoughts on the Miracle on the Plains?
No. I mean, that's one of those things. Just like I say, looking back on it, what are we, 12 years later now? You're just like that. That's I'm glad I got to witness it live.
Yeah.
It's something that as we've stated many times, neither one of us are Auburn fans, but we have plenty of family that is, and it was really special to watch. So
yeah, certainly was.
Yeah.
All right. So where can people find you? Where can people find the show?
So you can find the show on obviously YouTube. We are on most streaming platforms for our podcast platforms. For the audio version, you can find us on social media. We have a Facebook page. Just search for Aluminum House Podcast, and we have a X page It's Aluminum House Pod. And you can find me on X at Marty Quacker.
And you can find me at MATTHEWWWBRO dot. No, not dot. BROWN. That's Matthew with 2 extra W's. Brown like the color on X. Thank you guys for joining us for the Vault episode 3. Have a great